Look, it's a global pandemic, right? And I think you're seeing all over the world, having it under control can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different countries. So we're not at the beginning, we're not at the end, we're somewhere in the middle.
Hello and welcome to GZERO World. I'm Ian Bremmer, and today I'm sitting down with Senior Advisor to the President of the United States, Jared Kushner. We'll talk Middle East peace, the pandemic, and the upcoming U.S. election. A little China, too. It's the second time on the show. I spoke with him in January when the White House unveiled its much-anticipated peace plan between Israelis and Palestinians.
This is the first real offer that they've ever had. Right, it's a real offer. It has details, it has a map, and Israel's agreeing to a two-state solution and a map. So if they don't like certain aspects of it, go to the table and negotiate.
That went nowhere. But now, Jared says a historic deal between Israel and the UAE is proof that Trump's diplomacy is working. Summer 1967, the heads of 8 Arab nations convene in Sudan, and at least 3 are in a sour mood. Israeli forces have just captured what was Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip, Jordan's West Bank and East Jerusalem, and Syria's Golan Heights. In a show of defiance and unity, these leaders gathered in Khartoum, largely to draft this document. You could read it, but really, all that's remembered is the third paragraph, known as the 3 no's. No peace, no negotiations, and no recognition of the Jewish state. That was then. Half a century later, in the teeth of a pandemic and with an American election season bearing down, the United States has facilitated an about-face from that Khartoum resolution. Israel and the United Arab Emirates are fully normalizing relations, the third Arab country to do so after Egypt and Jordan, and the first in 26 years. In exchange, Israel is to hold off on annexing territory in the West Bank, a move that was being delayed anyway by a divided Israeli government and growing opposition. And yet with the recent UAE deal, it's clear that the Palestinian cause, rooted in one of the world's longest-running and most controversial conflicts, is becoming an afterthought. Gone are the days when Palestine served as a regional rallying cry, or at least the basis for peace negotiations. Iran, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen have all since become far more geopolitically pressing to Arab neighbors. And Israeli leadership, though facing troubles at home, has also been making its own rules, buoyed by American support with the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem and American recognition of Israeli annexations. Just remember, nothing occurs in a vacuum, including this deal. In Israel, up to 85% of those polled say they're unhappy with the way Prime Minister Netanyahu has handled his government's economic response to the pandemic. In the United States, President Trump continues to trail Joe Biden in the polls with less than 3 months to go before the election. Both leaders could use a win. Coronavirus has made that a great deal tougher. And a Middle East peace deal has a nice ring to it. Key foreign victory for both Trump and Netanyahu. So today, I bring you a key guest for both topics, the man behind Trump's Middle East peace plan and a senior White House advisor who's taken on serious pandemic duties. In March, with the U.S. economy faltering, the virus spreading, and hospitals short of desperately needed equipment, Jared Kushner set about on a daunting task: procure ventilators and personal protective gear, evaluate the need for a national testing regimen, a policy that later fell mostly to the states, and establish himself as a key player in the coronavirus response. While supporters applaud his consultant-driven approach to overcoming bureaucracy and addressing the most intractable of issues, critics say he's only added to a fractured federal response to a growing health crisis while questioning his motives in the Middle East. Either way, Kushner's unique status as both son-in-law and senior advisor to the president has made him the most influential person in the White House. Right after President Trump, that is. He joins me now. Jared Kushner, senior advisor to the president. Wonderful to be with you again.
Thank you, Ian. Great to be with you.
26 years since the last Arab-Israel agreement. President Trump fashions himself as a deal maker. Why, in your eyes, should we really be paying attention to this?
Well, like you just said, this is the first peace agreement that's been made in the Middle East in the last 26 years and only the third peace agreement in the last 70 years. with Israel. President Trump came into office promising to bring a different point of view to the region, and the Middle East was a very big topic for discussion in the last campaign. You had the Iran deal, which was a disaster. You had ISIS, which was roaming. They had a caliphate the size of Ohio, and you had a lot of our traditional allies feeling very alienated. And so President Trump came in, and again, you can't turn a battleship around overnight, but over 3.5 years, he's done a lot of unconventional things. We've been criticized very much along the way, but this big result shows that the president's strategy has been on the right path. It's now produced some results, and I believe President Trump's also set the stage for many more good things to come in the Middle East and throughout the world.
Saudis in play in terms of normalization?
I think everyone's in play. I think that people are tired of being stuck in the past, and I think the younger generation is less stuck in the old conflict the way that the older generation is. But they see Israel now as a military superpower, as an economic superpower, as a technology superpower, and they see huge opportunity by working together. And I think that a lot of the other Gulf countries now are seeing the deals that are starting to be announced out of Israel between Israeli and Emirati firms. And I think that they're saying, wait, we want to be in on the action. And so I do think you're going to have a lot of people following fairly quickly because, again, at our core, we all just want to live better lives. We want our countries to do great. We want to succeed. And this is just a really positive development for the region and for the world.
I want this deal to be a great deal for the Palestinians. It has to be. After 70 years of little progress, this could be the last opportunity they will ever have.
The top priority for so many administrations in the Middle East, including yours at the beginning, was Israel-Palestine. I wonder if you'd say, is it fair to say that the United States is not an honest broker between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but is an honest broker between Israel and, say, the Gulf allies?
I think that you can only be an honest broker when you're telling the truth and you're saying how you really feel. I think the United States is an effective broker, and in being effective, they're honest. We've been honest with everyone in the region about how we feel, and we need to form new alliances, and we need to get past grievances. We need to try things differently, and the president's approach was not one where he went out and started lecturing people. He went out and tried to figure out what are our common interests, what are our common challenges, how do we bring people together, and this is a great manifestation. I will say that after the president stopped in Saudi Arabia, he went from there to Israel, and then he went from Israel to Rome, where he met with the Pope.
To the Vatican.
And we called this agreement the Abraham Accords, which shows that the president's goal has been to bring the three Abrahamic faiths together to try to figure out how we can focus on shared opportunity. We all come from the same place. We're all human beings, and we have to let some of the past divisions go by the wayside.
If you're sitting as a Palestinian in today's environment, pretty much everything in the last few years has made it clear that you have less optionality than you used to. You're in a more challenging position vis-a-vis the Israelis, vis-a-vis the Gulf Arabs, vis-a-vis the Americans. Do you think that this is moving them more to a deal, or do you think that it's just not that relevant? It doesn't matter what the Palestinians are up to going forward?
Well, what I'll tell you, it's not moving them further away from a deal, right? So, again, they have a perfect track record of not making a deal in 25 years. So what they don't have today is a veto over what happens in the rest of the region. What they do have today is a telephone, right? So anytime they want to engage, they can engage. What they also have today, which they didn't have before, is a very, very detailed outline for what Israel's willing to do. We had Israel, they agreed to a two-state solution. So now if the Palestinians would like to have a state, they have a framework through which we can get them one. If they'd like to deal with the territorial issues for the first time in the negotiations ever, there's been a map that's been put out that Israel's agreed to publicly. We put out a $50 billion plan to revitalize their economy and to help them live better lives, which would double the GDP of their area. It would create 1 million new jobs. I mean, it's not that big of an economy. It's 5 million people, so it's not that hard to do. But you need to have private capital that's willing to go in there, and private capital is not willing to go in if you don't have stable leadership, you don't have rule of law, you don't have security. So we've put a lot on the table for them, and again, President Trump is not going to chase them, but he really would like to make a deal. He promised the Palestinian people he would get them a fair offer. He's gotten them a great offer out of the gate. And again, when they're ready to have a deal, a deal is more real today than I believe it's ever been.
I mean, no question, people have criticized it in the sense that, the percentage of land that they'd be offered is less than they would have been in the Clinton-era Accords, for example. But as you mentioned, they no longer have a veto over what's happening in the region, like with the UAE. I mean, the other piece of this is Iran. The Trump administration, of course, left the Obama-era Iran deal, which you've already referred to as disastrous on a couple of occasions. The fact that the UAE and the Israelis prioritize their concern about Iran much more than they do the Palestinian issue certainly puts more pressure on the Iranians going forward. If Trump were to win, I mean, we know that if Biden wins, his interest would be to try to remake something that looks like the old Iranian deal that he was a part of. If Trump wins re-election, what do you think the next steps are? Do we see anything different as a consequence of another 4 years between the Trump administration and the Iranian government?
So what I would say is that President Trump has worked so hard over the last 3.5 years to change the balance of power, to rebuild alliances that were broken, to, I would say, realign the region. And so that's taken a lot of work. And the tectonic plates that we've been able to shift, and you see that in this peace deal, lead me to believe that this isn't the end. This is actually the beginning of a lot of new opportunity. The Iranian deal, what President Trump will do is he'll wait to make the right deal. But what he's been able to do, Iran used to export 2.6 million barrels of oil when President Trump got into office a day. That's now down to almost zero. So their foreign reserves are crumbling. Their economy is crumbling. President Trump has nothing against the Iranian people. He wants them to thrive. It's a fabulous culture, a fabulous society. But their leadership right now is taking the money away from the people, and it's using what resources they had in order to really fund their proxy groups, which are really destabilizing the region all over the Middle East. And so I think what we've done is we've significantly weakened them, and that's led to less instability in Yemen, less instability in Syria. Even now you see in Lebanon how much weakened Hezbollah is, and that's because we've stopped a lot of the funding that Iran's had. So giving Iran back the ability to have resources without a meaningful change in their behavior, I think would be a very destructive thing. And all of the great progress that we've made over 3.5 years would be gone like that in a second.
President Trump has said that China is, his relationship with President Xi is not as good as it was a year ago, 2 years ago. In fact, on almost every area of U.S.-China policy, it seems to be heading towards more confrontation right now.
My attitude toward China is not friendly. With what they did with respect to the pandemic, the plague that came in from China, it just is a different feeling.
Would you say that we are turning towards containment as a policy towards a China that is not behaving the way we want them to?
I'm not sure that you can use a traditional framing to describe where we're headed with China. I think that we're right now in uncharted waters. Before the virus, I think that we'd agreed to a relationship of coexistence where we were fighting to protect American interests. I think we'd made a great trade deal that, again, it took us many years to fight. And keep in mind, even when the president made the trade deal, we still have $250 billion of tariffs on China at 25%, and then another $17 billion at 10%. So we still have not taken off a lot of our tariffs. We just haven't upped it. The virus that came over from China, obviously, is a major setback. We still are not satisfied to understand exactly where it came from, how it came about. The World Health Organization, the Chinese authorities, they have not provided the access that we've asked for. I do think there's a lot of decisions that were made that we still have a lot of questions about, and hopefully those questions will start to get answered soon. But the relationship between America and China will not be the same until we get to some kind of satisfactory answer on what happened with this virus, and then we need to figure out what happens next.
Would you say that we now have the pandemic under control in our country?
Look, it's a global pandemic, right? And I think you're seeing all over the world, having it under control can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different countries. Where we are now is we know a lot more than we did 5 months ago. We know who's most at risk. We know who has much less risk. We continue to make decisions based on the data. 5 months ago, there was a lot of fear about the fatality rates that came, and we realized that certain populations have different impact than others. And we also had a lot of fear on the supply side. So at that time, a lot of things were being invented. We had governors saying they needed 40,000 ventilators. We had, we had states saying they didn't have enough personal protective equipment for the hospitals, masks, ventilators, tests, all these things. We've dramatically surged supplies. We've been working with all the governors. Some governors have done a better job than others. And obviously when this is done, people will look back on the case fatality rates, they'll look on the economy, they'll look at all the different criteria that they'll judge it, and they'll say who did better. But at this point in time, we feel like we do have all the resources we need, both in terms of what we've produced domestically. We're very advanced in the vaccine, and obviously that's a critical priority, because once we get to the vaccine and we can prove that it's safe and effective, that really allows us to start the beginning of the end. So we're not at the beginning, we're not at the end. We're somewhere in the middle, but we're trying to use the data we have to be much more strategic. One great example is we're doubling and tripling down on the nursing homes. I think about 50% of the mortality right now has come from nursing homes. So we have to do everything we can to prevent spread to nursing homes, because you have a lot of DNRs, do not resuscitate, in the nursing home. And once people get it, it's harder, and it leads to death much quicker. So over the last month, we've been redirecting all of our point of care tests, which are the fastest tests that we have to protect the nursing homes, to make sure that we can keep the virus out of those nursing homes, and that will enable us to significantly decrease the mortality. So we're doing our best to work with the governors to balance keeping ourselves open as a country, protecting the American way of life, making sure we're not taking away citizens' liberties. We trust people to make the right decisions. We continue to put out the right information. We've tried very hard not to allow people who want to politicize the pandemic to be successful in doing so. And we're doing our best to preserve life, to bring safety, and obviously to save the economy. But it's a global pandemic. It's an unprecedented challenge, and we've pulled off a lot of amazing things in order to put ourselves in the position we're in right now to hopefully get through this as well as possible.
We've seen blue states versus red states. The cases first, of course, we're hitting the blue states a hell of a lot harder than the red states after that. You've said that you do not believe that President Trump is in any way politicizing the pandemic. I'm asking you, Jared, do you really believe that in the middle of this election campaign?
Look, there are certain people who are attacking him based on what he does or doesn't do. I'll give you an example. And again, I really don't want to get into the politics of the pandemic, but you have certain senators who will keep tweeting, where's the president's testing plan? Well, we put out a testing plan 3 months ago, and then we submitted a plan to Congress, yet they keep saying that there's no testing plan. You have some people saying, use the Defense Production Act, We've been using the Defense Production Act. You had a certain politician, who may or may not be running against the president, say, these are the 7 things I would do if I was in control. Well, we did all those 7 things. So they're putting out a lot of misinformation, which undermines public trust. And quite frankly, I don't think that's very helpful at this point in time. But obviously, you have a lot of politicians who have played politics with it. So again, we're just focused on doing the job. And my sense is people will judge afterwards whether we did the right job or the wrong job. I think we've done a lot more right than we've done wrong, and we've saved a lot of lives because of that.
Given what you just said, do you feel comfortable assuring the American people that it will be safe for them to vote in person come Election Day?
So I think that there's a lot of precautions being taken. Again, if it's safe to go to the supermarket to buy groceries, there's a lot of things that you can do, then it should be safe to go out and vote. I do think that what's happening now is you're seeing a lot of people trying to push a system that has not been proven, right? So universal mail-in voting is something that has not been done. If you want to do it right, it would probably take 5 to 10 years to get it right, and they're trying to push this through in 5 months. And so, Dr. Fauci the other day said that people should not be at risk to go out and vote in person. There are some accommodations if you want to request an absentee ballot. That's a tried and true method. But a universal mail-in push ballot like they're trying to do, where they send ballots to everybody, I think that's a recipe for a total disaster, and will definitely take steps to undermine people's confidence in the democracy, which is not what we need in this time.
Thank you very much. Jared Kushner, always good to be with you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Ian. All the best.
That's our show this week. Come back next week, and if you like what you see, of course you do, because who knows what you're gonna see, who we're gonna have on. Take a minute to sign up for GZERO's most excellent morning newsletter. It's called Signal.